Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Let's read some really scary stories. Tonight we have a bunch of scary stories to sink our hellish teeth into. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Also, if you like this content, then don't forget to subscribe, and if you would be so kind and click that like button, and don't forget the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. And from the rest of October there will be daily uploads, so you don't want to miss that. Now, let's get right into it. The Man in the Woods. Posted by Dependent Ad 87492. My name is Zach and I'm 18 years old. I had an idea of going to some wooded area that was popular. Of course, I brought my boyfriend Jacob Lloyd. We meet in college 2 weeks ago, and I brought my friend Tina. When we first met, she of course flirted with me, but I told her that I was gay and she understood. I was the one driving, my boyfriend was playing Smash Brothers Ultimate, and Tina was listening to music or watching YouTube videos. So we arrive to the camping area. It was not that rotten and abandoned. It felt dusty for me, and for some odd reason, "We're here," I yelled to my boyfriend and Tina. "Huh? So this is the place, eh?" "Yep." "Okay." So we set up everything that we need for the day that will be hanging out there past nightfall. We set up the campfire, and of course, I was on firewood duty. I gathered 5 firewood, and on my way back, I heard footsteps. I chalked it up as my own footsteps. That was until I saw a black figure behind a tree. I thought it was someone lost and of need of help. "You need help," I yelled at the black figure. Then he got out behind the tree. I kind of flinched because I thought he was going to lunge at me. Then he ran off. The next morning I was greeted by my boyfriend, and if you're wondering what I did with the firewood, well, obviously I put it in the campfire. Anyways, my boyfriend said, "Good morning, babe." "Morning, babe." He kissed me on the cheek, and I blushed. The day went on like any other, until I headed to the night. I volunteered to get the firewood again, so I got 10 firewood this time, and I saw him again, but this time he was closer. You need some help?" I was trembling while I talked. Then the worst happened. The guy lunged at me and I started to run. I got back with no firewood and yelled to my boyfriend, "Babe, call the cops." "Why?" "Some dude tried to kill me while I was trying to get firewood. Just hurry." He obeyed. The police came and there was no one in the woods. They said it could have been a bear or a wolf, but I know it was someone trying to kill me. Then I realised something when the cops left. Tina, where are you? Then I felt something hit my foot. I looked down and it was Tina's severed head. I screamed and told Jacob to pack everything and told him that Tina was dead. I didn't know why I didn't call the cops again. Maybe it was because that I didn't want to be the one to blame. So that's my story. Call me crazy, but I might go back to confront the killer that killed my friend. The firework incident, posted by Snoo Apples 661. For a while now, I have been wanting to share a scary memory from my past, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to write it to make the story not sound too repetitive, and he's, buts, and I all the time. So I hope this rewrite is a bit better than my last attempts. So let's get on with the story. When I was a kid, I hated going outside, mostly because I lived around the woods where wolves lived, and that we lived far from civilization, that if you were to find my house, you really needed something from me to go out that far. So when my mum made me go camping with them, I was sort of bummed out that I had to leave the comfort of my home to sleep out in the woods, and to me, that was a no bueno. This was a camp that me and my family normally went to because it had a pool, a playground and an arcade, of which was my favourite part of the camp, even to this day. I remember I'd go there every morning to hang out at the arcade. I even would remember going there to just buy sweets and root beer, while my family did their own thing. It was the best thing to pass the time. So while I was hanging at the arcade, my mum told me about a fireworks show going on later that night, so I'd have to be back around 7 or 6 to get ready and meet up with her and my sisters. So when the time came for the fireworks, I headed over to my mum, but realising my sister wasn't with her, so I asked where she was, but she told me that she was with her friend to watch the fireworks. I was sort of bummed out that not all of us would be together to watch it, but I didn't bother telling her, so I just went with my mum and my other sisters to the park to watch the fireworks. Now, I'm not sure how this happened, but one of the fireworks didn't go up to the sky, but instead went into a different direction. I was scared about the firework hitting me, so I stayed with my mum, hiding next to her, while everyone was panicking and scared. So they turned off the fireworks. When the fireworks turned off, I remember my sister running up to us being scared. Now I'm not sure if this is how I got the news of the story, but I can remember my sister was hanging out with her friend and she got hit by the firework, and that I don't remember what happened afterwards, as I think we stopped going to the campsite after that happened. And apparently there were some employees stalking the people in their trailers. But that was the last time I heard of that camp. I'd like to add a be safe message for those who are going camping and are going to see the fireworks, because you could end up being afraid of them for a long time. Home, posted by Bloody Spaghetti. From birth, I've the ground I've never felt, solid rocks within my hands I've never held. Born far above the bright blue sky, in this space here too I shall die. All I've ever known is the depths of outer space. I know the stars as well as I know my own face. This place is my only home. A flying ship is all I've ever known. Here life thrives in the perfect form. Existence above the barren skies is welcoming and warm. Here there is never any sorrow or greed. A floating heaven where none shall ever hurt or bleed. Forced to flee after the death of the sun, the darkness would not dare to spare one, not even the innocent children of man, a homeless species on the run, refusing to let our kingdom become undone. Even when all hope was gone, we refused to lay down for anyone. Gods may think that they have won, but it was too early to jump the gun. Because we are the children of the dawn. We won't fall to the demons of Wivkazoon, nor the curses any other fallen one. Defiantly we refuse to be a pawn. Our spirits are battered but not withdrawn. We fled on our mechanic paradise, constructed by the skilled and wise, avoiding a sure demise. Ascendant became the human race, forced to conquer the further edges of outer space. Among the stars we'll find our place. Complacency and pride have spread, clouding judgment or even the brightest head. At some point our fortune must end. Such is the fate of all things. In the end only entropy wins, and even supermassive black holes will tear apart under cosmic winds. 6 decades of blissful descendants, carnal lust devouring every other sense, when suddenly the darkness reared its ugly omnipotence. Drunk on glory, we forgot our weakness. We came the violent stellar flare, infecting all of humanity with the radioactive sickness. Sapiens became trapped under death's stare. One by one we started to die. Paradise was destined to fall. The ship rocked under the force of our collective cry. A cosmic plague was meant to wipe out us all, blessed with a fiery gift that stops each and every heartbeat. Minds decaying in still living skulls, as the bones deny tendons holding onto meat. Limbs and heads separate, watch them roll. Struck with this diabolical bane, all systems give up, all systems fail, drowning in overflowing lakes of pain. Hail, cruel cosmos, hail. One by one they all fall, but I am not affected at all. Why do I not share in their fate? Please do not make me wait. O universe, strike me down with all of your hate. Strike me down with all your hate. I kept watching as the heavens fell, while I remained stuck in hell. As my world became increasingly still and silent, my mind became hostile and violent. The heart overflowed with vicious intent. Needs became masturbatory and beyond repulsive. I wouldn't even care if their remains were corrosive, because the rage and lust inside became explosive. Now I dance with and make love to the dead. The loneliness has gotten so deep inside of my head. The persistence of stillness is driving me mad. I've become the captain of a floating tomb. The insides of the human mind are making me ill. Drunk on fumes, I fuck that which birthed me, that which was my own life-giving womb. Why am I forced to exist against my own will? I can no longer stand to be alone, for I am paralysed with an otherworldly dread. The rest of us are long dead and gone. I cannot seem to bring my pitiful existence to its end. Death and decay are all I see. Why do I feel like something is watching me, gasping for each and every breath? This endless nightmare I cannot flee. There's something behind, something that shouldn't be. I swear I heard it sound, but I dare not turn around. Will not avert my sight. This unstoppable horror is violating my mind, carving scar tissue inside the brain. I am slowly growing in love with this pain. My newfound pleasure in terror is once again gone. Once my body jolts and I realise I'm truly alone. The cruelty of it all makes me cry. Slam my head first into the walls. I beg to die. In the midst of this misery of mine, a necrotic husk flashes me a smile. I must have gone completely insane. Thinking of our forbidden union is driving me wild. For her sake, on this necropolis, I'll forever remain. I float in the dead space, caressed by the endless cold night. The stench of my visceral maze is devouring all light. This happened at exactly 12 AM Eastern Standard Time. I am terrified. 12 AM. I was on a call with my friend on Discord, watching them show off their character in a game. To me, it's 12 AM exactly, so my volume was very low. Normal so far, yeah. 12:01. I heard my mother call my name. She called my name from the kitchen, which is downstairs, but she's supposed to be asleep in her room. I take a look around the corner since our rooms are right next to each other, and she is, in fact, asleep in her room. I freaked out, shut my door, sat on my bed and continued to talk to my friend. 12:01 AM still. This happened within 30 seconds. I hear her call me again. I'm sure she called my name. It sounds like her. It sounds like my name. 2 seconds pass. She calls my name once more from the kitchen. This is undoubtedly her voice. I got up to go look again. This time I go halfway down the steps. Something feels wrong. 12:02 AM. Why would the TV be on? Maybe that's what I heard. I peek down the steps and look. The TV is off. I quietly run back up the stairs. When I start to feel adrenaline, I'm full of fear and adrenaline. and as I once again closed my door silently and hopped back into bed. It's 12:24 AM EST. What do I do? What was that? I'm very atheist, for the record. So surely it wasn't my brain making up some religious demon or something. I don't believe in them, and I am sure of it. I'm not just in denial. What was that? Maybe it wasn't religious. I'm panicking. Edit. 11:05 PM. Next night. Nothing so far has happened, and I'm awaiting 12 AM tonight. Also, to clarify, since I've gotten a lot of comments about this, I meant I'm atheist, as in my brain won't fabricate anything religious, being that I am 100% not religious. Also, not to be rude, but I didn't want many comments saying, turn to God, his eyes are wide open. As much as I appreciate the support, I am simply a non-believer. Thank you. Green hair, posted by Black Cat, 12:06. Green hair. We were about 8 or 9 the day Mum took Elle and I over the heath. It was a hot and bright day in the middle of summer holidays. We had been collecting natural materials to make a collage. When we got home, and Mum's rucksack was full of stray feathers, wild grasses, leaves and twigs, and we were on our way home, where Gran was making a cheese flan and salad for dinner. As we were all very hot and slightly tired, Mum had decided that we would wade through the river instead of going back over the hills the way we had come. The thought of pushing my tiny wheelchair through the muddy-bottomed, weed-tangled river never seemed to faze my mum. She was a healthy, fit 26-year-old and knew the heath like the back of her hand. The river wasn't very deep at that part, so Mum tipped my wheelchair back, told Elle to hold on to the handle, and we went in. The water immediately soaked our clothes through, and Elle and I started to scream, giggle, and splash each other in sheer delight. Then we saw them. Weeds? Flowing with the current of the river, swaying back and forth like a woman's long tangled, unkempt hair, and I got the distinct impression that what we saw could have been either thing. I glanced at Elle and instantly knew that she was having the same uncanny notion. The weeds started to curl around our legs and the wheels of my wheelchair, making our progress a little more laborious. And our previous screams of playful fun changed to moans and squeals of unease and disgust as we felt the weeds gently tugging at our legs. At no point did Mum ever look anxious or fazed by this experience. She kept saying, "It's only water weeds, you two, come on, don't be silly. You've seen them loads of times." We finally reached the other side of the river, and as Mum dragged my wheelchair backwards up the riverbank, Elle climbed up it and sat down beside me. We both just stared silently at the river and the sea of green for what felt like the longest time, but in fact was only 10 minutes, before walking the rest of the way home. That night, after a hot bubble bath and cheese flan salad, in our flannel pyjamas and slipper socks around the fire drinking hot tea, we told Gran about our adventure. Our Gran took a sip of tea from her mug and told us the story of green hair. She had been a real person, though her real name had been forgotten by Gran, conveniently. Elle and I thought. Anyway, she had lived in the village around 1912, before the area was built up and modernised and developed into what it has become. She was young and kind, with a pretty face and beautiful long blonde hair, a daughter of gentleman farmer, and was deeply in love with a handsome young soldier. They were to get married, but before they could, the Great War broke out and a young man was called up to fight. He was killed by a hand grenade on the front line, and when she found out she was widowed, before she'd even become a wife, she lost the will to live, and driven by grief-stricken insanity, she went to the same river that we waded through, and she threw herself in. The river was as wild as the land at that time, and by the time her body was discovered, it was blue, bloated, and half-eaten by fish. Her long corn-coloured hair had become interwoven with the slimy algae and long strands of evil-smelling river weeds which clogged and choked the bed of the river. In fact, the pathologist who performed the post-mortem said that the body may have been found sooner, if not for the dark green weeds that appeared to have curled around her limbs and torso, anchoring her corpse to the riverbed for days. From that time onwards, it was said that the river was haunted, cursed, or both. Anyway, an extremely bad place. People claimed to see the spirit of the young woman kneeling beside the river and weeping bitterly. More commonly, people often saw the body of the girl floating on top of the water, with long green hair or weeds streaming out behind her, and so she was given the name of Green Hair. Elle and I asked Gran why we hadn't heard this story before. Gran just smiled and said, because it was an age ago, even before she was born. The area was developed and built up, and the river was tidied up and reconstructed, and along with it, the tragic tale of Green Hair was lost in the stream of passing time. We didn't altogether believe Gran's morbid tale, but when Elle and I talked about it in bed that night, neither of us could dismiss the eerie feeling that we saw green hair flowing in the river that day. Bonfire Night, the legend of Martin Janus. Posted by Black Cat 1206. It was 2 days before Bonfire Night, and the weather forecast for the upcoming week promised a soggy, miserable 5th of November, a total washout. And there were threats from the organisers that the public bonfire and fireworks display would be cancelled due to the bad weather. But like so much of the time, decisions made by the local council were made late and last minute. Ever since the incident back in the 80s, there was always a kind of unmentioned sense of dread resonating from all the adults over 40 leading up to the 5th of November every year, which was totally lost on the children and young people in the area. Not that the kids weren't aware of the incident. Even the babies knew about the gruesome tragedy of the 5th of November 1985, usually via older siblings who, although not even born at the time, relished in embellishing and exaggerating the details of the actual facts just to spook their younger brothers and sisters. It's all made up anyway. Nathan and Lucas only said it to freak us out. You know what they're like. Jane looked unconvinced at her cousin as she jammed more straw in the leg of the guy. I know most of it is made up. I'm not completely stupid, you know. She grinned broadly before continuing. Daniela ain't like that though, and remember what she said about it. Jolin laughed, then considered what his little cousin had just said. Jane was right. Although Jane's older sister teased them, she wasn't as bad as his two older brothers, who were merciless in their torment of any younger relatives. Some of it doesn't even sound real though, Jolin continued laughing. I mean, who heard of a guy coming to life and hacking people up to get revenge for a kid's death? It sounds like a really bad horror film. You've got it mixed up as usual. It was the kid's ghost that possessed a guy because he accidentally burnt to death, Jane explained, exacerbated with her cousin. There was a boy though. He did get trapped in the bonfire. He did burn to death when it was lit. Nobody could hear his screams through all the commotion going on. Jane paused, looking at her cousin and laughing at his face. He had turned a sickly shade of green. All right, shut up, Jay. That's really rank. Okay, it is true though. My dad was in the same class as the boy, James said triumphantly. That day after school, Jolin went to his aunts and uncles for dinner, and to put the finishing touches on the guy in preparation for the fireworks display the next day. Sitting at the dinner table, drinking tea after finishing a plate of egg and chips, Jolin finished the mouthful of bread and butter and said, "What was the name of the boy who was burned on the bonfire in the 80s, Uncle Frankie?" Frankie swallowed his tea and put the mug down on the table and replied in his usual soft, low and deep voice, "It ain't fit talk for the dinner table, Joel." What happened to him knocked this community for six. Everyone around here knew his family really well. It destroyed his poor parents. Frankie poured another cup of tea for himself, and Terry, Jolan's auntie, came to the table and sat down beside him. Martin Janus. Martin, that was his name, she said, looking slightly nervous at just the sound of the name. He was a bit of a loner, weren't he? Jolin said flippantly. Nah, not at all. On the contrary, he was your dad's, Patrick's, Owen's and my best mate, Frankie said, waving his hand dismissing Jolin's crass comment. We all used to knock around together, me, Jojo and your mum, Connie. Terry continued her husband's sentence enthusiastically, her eyes growing wide and bright, sparkling at the memory of her youth, instantly making her look 20 years younger. Were you there when it happened? The night he died? Jolin asked cautiously, this time choosing his words and tone more carefully. Terry looked at her nephew for a few drawn-out minutes before speaking again. We were late. Too late, me, Jojo, Marnie. We're always late. We were getting ready for the bonfire, and after Marnie had picked her little brother up Her mum couldn't take him because the baby was sick. Terry looked across at her husband and said, "She really moaned about it, didn't she, Frank?" Yes, she was narked about it. Owen and your dad, Patrick, were at football practice. Me and Connie had to go shopping after school for your gran. We were all going to meet at the air park at 6 that evening. Martin must have got there earlier to put the guy in position. He was a right nerd sometimes. Frankie's words trailed off, then gave a sad, forced a little laugh as he remembered their friend. He was wearing my tracky jacket. That night too, he borrowed it at school cause the temperature had dropped and he didn't want to wear his blazer out of school. It was my favourite too, the maroon one. Frankie coughed and looked away from the table, clearly finding it hard to keep his composure. Terry reached over and took Frankie's hand, squeezing it gently. She took a deep breath and continued for him. The police said he must have tripped and fell soon after he placed the guy at the centre top of the bonfire. He knocked himself out cold. The bonfire was too high and treacherous for anyone to climb it alone. All those heavy bits of wood and kindling sticking out here, there and everywhere. He should have waited for us to get there. He should have stuck to the plan. Jolin looked at his aunt and uncle with the empathy of a 30-year-old, and there was a sombre yet comfortable silence. They found the remains 3 days later, but before that there was a police search for him. We all looked for him too. It was the worst week of our lives, Terry said, breaking the silence and getting up quickly to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. The morning of the 5th of November was cold and damp. The bonfire and firework display was on a knife edge of being cancelled, but by the time Jolan met his older brother Lucas and their cousin James outside their secondary school at 3:45, the day had dried out, if not warmed up. And as they started walking home to Jolan's and Lucas' house, there was a buzz of excitement in the air. "We're home, Mum, Dad," Jolan called out from the hall. Lucas ran upstairs without saying a word. "I'm in the kitchen," his mum called back. Jane went to the kitchen and embraced her aunt warmly. Connie hugged her back, saying, "Hello, you two. How was school?" She was surrounded by 2 pans of beans and chilli, a tray of sausages and another of baked potatoes on the side. There was a sticky toffee pudding and a tray of cinder toffee. It was okay, I suppose. Jolan kissed his mum on the cheek. You've been busy," James said, glancing around at all the food. "Yes, I have, so hands off till later, yeah?" Connie slapped James' hand playfully away from the cinder toffee. "You and Joel, go get changed. We need to meet the others at 5, and you need to get that guy from the shed too." "I swear it's moved, Joel," James said, looking perplexed and a little unnerved. Jolan looked at his cousin and laughed joyfully. "Don't be stupid, James. It probably just fell on its side, and me and Dad sat it back up again in a different place. No big deal." James looked at him dubiously, then back at the guy and back at Jolan again. "Okay, let's get him to the car." When they arrived at the air park, it was swarming with people, families with excited rosy-cheeked children, young couples huddled together in romantic embraces, and groups of kids shouting and running around boisterously. Jolan and Jane lugged the guy to the bonfire, which would be lit at exactly 7 o'clock on the dot and gave it to one of the organisers, then went to find Nathan and Daniela. They found the others with one of the groups of rowdy kids that they all knew from school, and they spent the next hour just walking around the small food and fireworks stalls where Jolyn bought a packet of sparklers and Nathan tried to buy some real fireworks but wasn't old enough, to the amusement of Jolyn. At 10 to 7, the 4 cousins broke away from the rest of the group and made their way back to the designated meeting place where their parents told them to gather. The fireworks display was the same as it always was every year, and Jolyn told himself that this year was the last year that he was going to go with the rest of his family. Nathan was almost 16 and he had his mates, so he didn't mind hanging around with the family. But Jolyn thought that at 12, the law of the bright lights and loud bangs, whirs and whistles of the annual firework display were wearing thin. Joel, our guy's about to go on. Look, watch. Jolyn's train of thought was broken by James' excited squeals, and he was snapped back into the present as he watched their pride and joy be placed at the top centre of the huge pyre, and the 3 organisers who were about to light it. Suddenly, there was a heavy strong wind that seemed to come from nowhere. It appeared to only be focused on the immediate vicinity of the bonfire, not really affecting the area beyond the bonfire. Where's Ellie? She was here a minute ago. Ellie. A woman's voice broke the expectant uneasy silence, and people began to move back and apart, making little motions of movements rippling throughout the crowd of spectators. The attention of the crowd was now redirected away from the majestic bonfire to searching for a misplaced child. Glancing around at the adult's feet, Jolyn couldn't help but notice and identify the look of sheer panic and anxiety. Suddenly something caught his eye, just a flash of red amongst the darkness and gloom of the chilly night. He looked in the direction that he saw the glimmer of colour and took a deep breath while simultaneously grasping his cousin's shoulder to get her attention quickly. James? It turned out he didn't need to do this, as James had already seen it at exactly the same time. They looked at each other. Come on, quick, Jolyn whispered hoarsely. Grabbing James' hand, she looked at Jolyn slightly hesitantly, before shrugging and following him. Jolyn didn't want to be right about what he thought he had seen, and the cold, damp hand of fear was already at the bottom of his spine, slowly but surely making its way up his back, resulting in even the simplest actions, like putting one foot in front of the other, an almost impossible task. They ran to the back area of the air park, where the organisers stored all the fireworks for the display and various other apparatus and materials. They ducked under the big notice with the words, "Keep out, staff only," in big red letters, and got right to the back of the bonfire. The sounds of the crowd and the fireworks were deafening. This feels really dodgy, Joel. I don't like it. Neither do. James, look. They both looked in the same direction, at the spirit of Martin Janus. He was standing there, right in front of them, bathed in an eerie, silvery blue glow, which illuminated him from head to toe. He didn't look like a ghost. He just looked like a boy around Nathan's age. He wore blue jeans and a maroon hoodie. His face and body weren't burnt or disfigured in any way. On the contrary, his features were fine and handsome, with green eyes and a head of strawberry blonde hair. He did look incredibly sad. He pointed He pointed at the area just beside the edge of the bonfire, where the display area began. Jolyn and James looked at each other in bewilderment. "There's nothing there, Joel." James stepped forward gingerly and cocked her ear to the cold night air. "What is it, Jay? What can you hear?" Jane put her finger to her mouth. "Shh." She gestured to him to come near her. "I think I heard something over there," she said, pointing in the same direction that the spirit of Martin Janus had. The two cousins ran over to the pile of lumber and firewood. It looked as though it had been disturbed recently, like it had been scattered and strewn over the ground. They both stepped over the timber and listened carefully. They could hear a very faint crying, scuffling sound coming from further back amongst the stacked kindling. Jolyn and James started to remove the wood away from the pile. Every now and then Jolyn looked over his shoulder to find their ghostly guide still gazing at their efforts, sadly and with earnest concentration. After another 5 minutes of rummaging through the wood, a small podgy baby hand appeared, and the crying became clearer and loud. They continued removing the timber, and soon a dirty little face became visible. Jolyn threw the wood to the ground, while James reached in and gently pulled a cold and frightened 5-year-old girl out of the piled up firewood. It was the missing girl, Ellie Egan. "What were you doing in there then, kid?" Jolyn asked the infant kindly. James held the small girl in her arms as Jolyn wrapped his jumper around her. "I was looking for Sophie and I got stuck in the wood. I was crying for Mummy, but the nice boy said he would get someone to help me." The small girl sobbed and wiped her nose on Jolyn's jumper. "What nice boy, Ellie?" James asked softly, but they couldn't get much more out of Ellie, so they gave up playing detectives and carried the missing girl back to be reunited with her mother. The hour which followed the reunion of Ellie Egan and her family was a whirlwind of emotions. Thanks and praises for the two young kids who found the small girl. Both Jolyn and James were slightly overwhelmed by the attention, and by 8:30 they just wanted to go home to chill out. On the way home in the car, Jolyn's dad, Patrick, turned to his son and niece and asked, "How did you two know where to look for that baby?" "A friend showed us where to look," they said in unison. "Well, I reckon you and your friend saved that baby's life," Connie said, proudly beaming broadly at both Jolyn and James. Both the cousins looked out of the window and waved at the figure of the boy in blue jeans and a maroon hoodie. He waved back, then slowly faded away. That's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Remember to click the like button and subscribe, and turn on the bell so you get notified every time I upload. Don't forget, if you have any scary stories, submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares, and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.